Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And in the previous episode we have split apart the RF85 because we had so many different issues. In this episode we're going to fix all those issues and start to put it back together. I hate to work with dirty parts, so that is why I have already cleaned up the differential housing and the gearbox, but also the bell housing. So now that all this is clean, we can have a closer look on what we're going to do. So the first thing we're going to do is to fix the oil seal right here on the main shaft, which is going into the differential housing. This is the shaft that is driving actually the gearbox. As you remember, we had an oil leak, and you can still see the oil coming out here. See that? But that's because the seal there is worn. So we're going to change that seal out with a new seal. We will also recondition the slave clutch cylinder. In fact, I'm going to replace this one. And we're going to change out the seals with new seals so that the clutch is going to work properly again, because we had quite some issues with the clutch. We're also going to replace the clutch, and here we have a brand new clutch plate. We're also going to replace the pressure plate. This is the pressure plate, and that is a new one because the old one isn't the right one. So we had to put too much force on it, and by the way, it was actually bent. And of course, if we're going to replace the clutch and the clutch pressure group, we're also going to change the throwout bearing. This is the old one. Here I have a new throwout bearing. I also have the new seals, as I mentioned before, for the drive shaft going into the differential housing. And then this is the new cylinder for the clutch itself. It's wrapped up now in plastic because I need to adjust it a little bit. The original ones are 72 millimeters in diameter. The newer ones are a little bit smaller, especially the truss bearing. Look, you can see that doesn't fit properly. It's too loose. You don't want this to be dropped off. This is the new truss bearing, and you can see this is a real tight fit. So I need to take off just a little bit of that, and then that should be okay. That's why I have it wrapped up. And of course, if we're going to put everything together, use new bolts. Sourcing all those new parts for an old race car isn't always that simple. And I've been really lucky. There is a business in the UK, it's called URS, Universal Racing Services, where you can still get all these parts and very good advice. So I was very, very pleased when Simon supported me with all the parts that I needed. We had a couple of phone calls, and then about 2 weeks later, I had all my stuff in the mail. Now, for clarity, I'm not making a commercial for URS, Universal Racing Services, but if you're into racing and you need parts for your race car, especially in Europe, it's a good place to go to. So the first thing we're going to tackle is a broken off bolt. Now, this is the bolt that attaches the bell housing to the space frame, and I suspect that this bolt broke off when we were going into the turbine before the spin, and is not the result of the spin that we had. And the reason I'm saying is because if this bolt breaks off, then the whole back end gives kind of way. Anyhow, we need to get it out, and as you can see, it's actually sitting inside. And that is always, well, a bit difficult to get it out because you need to drill it in the middle and then use a reverse stab. And then turn that in, and then hopefully it comes out. Now, drilling right in the center, not easy like this because that bolt is not smooth. So somehow we got to make sure we get it in the center. And that's what I'm going to use, an old piece of metal here, which I'm going to turn on the lathe so I can just slide it in, and I'll drill a hole right in the middle, and that way I will have a proper center hole to trying to get this piece out. So I'm going to take off some metal here so the top part can then actually slide into the hole that we have where the bolt is. So I've finished drilling that little piece that will go right here, and then all I need to do is stick it on my drill like so, as you can see, and now I can properly drill at least a pilot hole. Here we go. Let's see if this is going to work. All right. So let's see if we can get it out or not. And here it comes. And here it is. So as you could see, getting this bolt out, which broke off inside the casing, isn't all that hard as long as you can drill a center hole in it and then have a reverse tap, and then it's going to come out. And it's handy to make these little tools like this. It really helps a lot, and it avoids a lot of trouble. It takes a few minutes to make it. Now, you don't need to have a lathe for this. You can use an old bolt and round it off or whatever, and then drill a central hole in it, and that will work as well. So here we have one bolt, and this is what I'm supposed to have, an in-bus. I don't have a second one, but this is another bolt that I have laying around. Of course, I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to go for an in-bus. I need to get a new one. I don't have it available, but I don't need it right now anyway, because it's only when we're going to mount this bell housing back to the space frame that I'm going to need the proper bolt. Now, the interesting part on this bolt is, and the threading is, that it's metric. A lot of the other bolts on this bell house are not metric. Now, notice there were already inserts, thread inserts, and that's quite common in this kind of casing. So, yeah, I guess it has been fixed once before. Next up is the replacement of the slave clutch cylinder. This is my new one. That's the one that's going to go in, and you can already see I kind of took a little bit of the metal off so the throwout bearing will fit properly. But first of all, we need to get the old one out and remove all the old seals and replace them with new seals. So let's see if we can get the seals out with a little screwdriver. You might need two. All right. So that's seal one. And it still looks fairly good. These are square seals, and you can't get them anymore, unfortunately. Once you got it out a little bit, it's going smooth. And one more in the back. So the next thing I'm going to do is to clean out all these grooves where the seals were sitting in. And for that I'm using a small brush. You don't want to have no debris inside. Use some brake cleaner on it. I'm also blowing through the little feed holes. I want to make sure those are open. Just see if there's no sharp edges. Well, that all feels good. All right. And here we have the old seals. These are square seals. These are the new round ones, and I think that will just do it. I think that they must be the right size. So it may be a little bit difficult to get them in. Let's see. We're going to put them in, making sure there's no dirt on them. And I'm going to put a little bit of special grease on it. I'm going to try not to be in the way, guys, but it might be a little bit more difficult. So if you're putting these rings in, you've got to make sure that they are absolutely dust-free and there's no debris on them, because otherwise you're going to have issues later on. All right. That's number one. And hopefully it sticks out far enough. It feels like it. Now let me do the second one. I'm putting some special grease on these. It's the kind of grease you use for your brake calipers. Okay. And one more, which is the last one, and then hopefully this will be all right. So I've cleaned up the cylinder, and now I should be able to get it in. I think it's all the way now. And that feels good. All right, so now we can install the throwout bearing. Here we go. And that's done. Next up is the oil seal right here on the differential housing. And if you look close to that black part, which is the differential housing, you will notice something special. On the side, there's a marking. And as you can see, it says Audi, Volkswagen, and even Brazil. So this is the casing of the differential of a Volkswagen Beetle. And that doesn't mean that the gearbox is a Beetle gearbox. In fact, it's a Hewland H9 gearbox, and it's serial number 1646. So on the side you have parts from Hewland, both on the left and on the right, towards the drive shafts. So this is the good thing about these kind of cars. If there is an issue with the housing, you can just get another housing from a Volkswagen Beetle. There's some small modifications you need to do to it, but you can always reuse those. And I have a couple of those in spare because they are not really strong. So there is the seal we need to get out, and it's not always easy to get those out, because ideally you would open up the differential and then take out the circlip on this shaft, and then you could pull the shaft out. But I'm not going to open all that up. That's too much work. So I'm going to try to pull this out as much as I can. See, but I can't pull it any further. And then try to prime out this seal. It's coming slowly. We have a new seal, and the problem we are having is that we need to get it over the spline, so it's going to be stretched a little bit. So that's why I'm greasing this up so I don't damage it too much, and hopefully we can get it over. Right, let's try it the other way around. We're going to put the spring over it first. Now the rubber. All right. Took a little bit of fiddling. All I need to do now is put this spring back in place. All right. It is in place, and now all I need to do is slide it in and we should be good to go. It is better if you can take the shaft out, huh? So you don't need to stretch this seal. So we are in essence done with fixing all these parts. We fixed the bolt issue, we have installed a new seal on the differential housing, and we have put in a new piston in the clutch slave cylinder together with new seals. So all that is now good. So in essence I can now start to put things back together. But before we do so, we're going to see if we can match up the clutch and then mount the clutch pressure plate, followed by the bell housing, and then we will insert the actual differential and the gearbox into it. And after that, we still have to build all the suspension around it and so on. So let's get on with it. So now we need to install the new clutch pressure plate and the clutch plate itself. So the clutch plate fits right here onto the flywheel. But pay attention that you mount it in the right direction. This side is facing the gearbox, because if I place it the other way around, I'm having a problem. Now typically there's some marking on it that tells you which direction you need to install the clutch plate. But one of the problems we have when installing a clutch plate is that the plate has to be centered. It cannot be off-center because we've got a spline right here. There's a little hole in there in the crankshaft, and all that needs to line up because the shaft that comes in from the gearbox needs to go through the spline here of the clutch and then fit nicely into that hole. So it's important that we do center the disc. The problem with that is if you put the disc in between, even though you might have tried to center it, and then you put it onto the flywheel, like so, and we start bolting down the pressure plate, this disc will actually slide down and it will be off-center. There are many different ways to skin a cat, and it's the same thing for centering the clutch plate. Some people will just put the plate in between the flywheel and the pressure group, then bolt it down slightly and then move around the clutch plate with a screwdriver until it's all lined out. They do it on eyesight. Some people are good in this and that works. Other people using a spare shaft, a shaft from an old gearbox, and you can stick it through, and then it aligns the spline of the disc and the hole in the crankshaft. Or you can make yourself a plug, and I made myself a plug right here out of nylon, which is representing actually the shaft. So I'm going to give you a little bit more of a close-up on how I made this in a few seconds. And also, you could actually go out and buy yourself a fancy tool like this to center the clutch. This works pretty well, and it's almost the same as this tool, but this is very handy. Of course, it's only for one specific car. This you can apply to any different cars. So this is our shaft coming from the gearbox. The top part is the part that's going to fit inside that little bearing inside the crankshaft. The spline, that is where the clutch plate fits onto. And of course, if you're buying a clutch plate, you've got to make sure it's the right spline, you see. Now that is locked. As you can see, that needs to be all aligned properly. And that is why I have made a little plug. And if you look on the plug, you will see that the top part is the same dimensions as that piece that goes into the hole of the crankshaft. The middle part is the same dimensions as the spline, and then the outer part is the same dimensions of the actual fingers of the pressure plate. Some of you that are really into racing will say, well, Steve, you know, this is Bullock's. This is not a racing disc. This is a standard disc. And you're right. This is not a racing disc. This is a enforced disc, but it's not a racing disc. Now, my experience with my RF85 is that I don't need to put a very expensive racing disc in, which runs you about $500–600 or euros to get it with the pressure plate, and sometimes even more. A kit like this runs you about 150 euros. So that is a enforced disc and a new pressure group. That's what I'm using this, and if I need to change it, I will change it. Right, so now if you're getting a new pressure group, then this surface is typically protected with some coat, and you got to clean that up before you install it. The same thing goes for the flywheel. Make sure that there is no more grease on it. Put some proper copper grease onto that. And copper grease is grease which is really having the color of copper, but does not disappear when it gets wet. Typically use that a lot on brakes, but I like to use it in this case as well. So now we are basically ready to install our pressure group. By the way, the torque on these is about 24 Newton meters. So here we go. I've got my disc and I install it in the right way. I've got my pressure group. This is right here. You place it together. And I'm going to put my plug through it in the middle, so it fits nicely into the spline. Here we go. I'll try to place it where it's supposed to be. All right, now you can see everything is easy, everything is centered, right? Now all I need to do is put the bolts up. Now it's quite normal that you have some play here initially. And that is because we will bolt it down and then you have pressure of the pressure plate onto the disc. Right now it's like in a disengaged condition. Now remember, if you put this to torque, this is a dry torque, so the bolts are not greased. And now I just need to remove the plug and we are done. So here's the bell housing, and let's see if we can get this installed in the proper way. So now we're going to bolt down the bell housing to the engine. So we have installed the bell housing to the engine. We also hooked it up to the space frame on both sides. And remember, one bolt broke off on one of those sides, but we fixed that. I hooked up all the hoses. We hooked up the starter motor. So basically the bell housing is complete. I still need to work a bit on the cover here. I need to make a new seal for that. All right, now I can lift up the whole car. But first of all, I need to connect the hoses for the slave cylinder. Now the one that is returning, this is the one to bleed actually the slave cylinder, because otherwise I can't really bleed him. So here's the gearbox, and it's not that heavy, but it's, I would say, heavy enough. So finally we got it in place. So the last couple of bolts are now going in, and then the gearbox is locked to the bell housing. And then we're going to assemble the suspension again and the drive shafts. So next up is the lid here on top, and this is the cover that needs to go up here. But I need to create a new seal because I don't have a proper seal anymore, so we'll have to cut one. I'm going to use some fairly thick gasket paper, and you can get this on fairly big sheets, and it's very handy and economical. And to punch the holes into the gasket where the bolts are going through, it's handy to have some kind of a dies. And these are dies that I have right here in different sizes, as you can see. And they are very handy to actually punch the right hole. So use a piece of wood, and then you can center the die, and then just hit it with a hammer. And that's it. You got a pretty nice little hole. So that should just fit properly. As you can see, everything lines up. So now the gasket is ready, and I have cut out 2 layers to make it a bit thicker. And of course the middle part I had to cut out with my Stanley knife because I don't have a big die like this. So let's peel off the protective plastic, because I had this on there while we were cleaning everything up. Now we can install it. And remember, what I'm putting up here is not silicone. It's something that stays liquid. Here's the shock absorber. I'm going to set the preload now, and it needs to move about another centimeter. Let's see if we can turn this guy. This turns very smooth, but in the other direction it will be a little bit more tough. So I'm just going to turn it until I have 95 millimeters. And here I'm still a bit off, but notice that this ring is thinner than the other one. That's why I'm off with about half a centimeter. So let's do some more. No, wrong direction. And you see, it becomes more and more tough to rotate, huh? All right, let's check it again. And that is about right. A little bit more. All right, let's see. I think 1 turn is about 1 millimeter. Right. So I got both of them now more or less set to the same. And now we should be good to install them. So let's see if we can get it in. Okay, that is in. So now I just need to put the bolt in the bottom. As you have seen, it's a little bit of fiddling. Now this would be a perfect job for 2 people, but of course I work on my own, so it is always a little bit more difficult. So now it's time to install the drive shafts, and I'm going to repack them with special grease. And I just want to make sure that all these bearings are very well greased. These are the CV joints. So the next thing we're going to do is to install the drive shafts, and that can be a little bit of a greasy job. I cleaned it up as much as I could. I have a bucket and a little support here, so I can put the shaft on there. It makes it a little bit easier to work. This can be a little bit of fiddling to get all the bolts in. Let's get the little nuts up. Not a lot of space, as you can see. So I'm going to install all these, and then guys, I'll come back to you later. The next thing up is to install the upright. I'm gonna put it up here first. So now we're putting the drive shaft up, and it's about 6 bolts, not too bad. You know, when you're cleaning up things before you put things back together, and then you noticed while you're putting things together, you get it all dirty again. So we have completed the suspension on this side. I still have to do it on the other side. And then we'll still need to hook up the brake hoses and bleed the brakes. I have to re-bleed the clutch as well because I had to disconnect the cable because it was in the wrong place. And then we have to put the exhaust pipe up and then still fix the fuel leak, which is just a hose. And then we have to do all the alignment all over again on this car because that will be off for sure. But all by all, this went fairly well. And in terms of time, I think this took me about 8 hours in total, but that's with filming, so that's quite a job to do. But here we are. So in the next video, you probably will see me doing the alignment and running up the engine and doing some changes on the carburetor. So anyhow, I hope you enjoyed the video, and so did I, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.